Erin. Erin has a great adventure. We wanted her to share that story with us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Alrighty. Well, first, I do want to start off by agreeing with Nathan and Jess in that song and what we just sang and how great is our God. And this story is going to strongly show that in testimony. Also, Jessica and Nathan, honestly, I can just go on for hours about how much they've influenced my life and made me the person I am, but because of God in their lives. And yeah, okay, not going to get into that, but alrighty. So this is more of a story, and then I'll explain it in the end and everything. So I am a photographer. I went to college for photography, and I met a friend in California a few years ago, and long story short, I ended up going to New York to photograph her wedding just like 3 weeks ago, I think. And I had a friend coming with me from college who was also a photographer, and she was supposed to come with me and help me shoot the wedding, and we were trying to get through customs, and she had a Swiss passport, and there was all this crazy stuff that was involved in it, and we ended up that she wasn't able to come with me, and we missed like 2 flights and had to like go downtown to the embassy and try and figure things out. And in the end, I ended up hopping on a plane into one of the hugest cities, New York City, by myself. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know why I was exactly terrified. Like, I knew it was big, but I knew that I was going to be fine the whole time. And like leading up to the trip, I kept thinking there was something that was going to go wrong. It's like I secretly knew, and I was preparing myself to do this on my own. I like stared at the map and like stared at the subway system and just tried to figure it all out. But anyways, I ended up there alone, and anything that I came across in any picture, anything of like my mom or my sister or my dad, I just started like bawling. I'm like, I'm alone, I'm not gonna do this, and I'm not gonna make it through, how am I gonna do this? And I'm just texting everybody saying, I'm terrified, okay, like I'm on the plane, and like giving every detail about what's happening. And I was texting Jess, and she's like, just put worship music on and just like drown yourself out, and you're just in this other world. And I'm like, okay. So I sat on the plane for like an hour flight, and I put my headphones in, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, this is great. This is my own little world. And I never took those headphones out until I got to the hotel. Seriously, I had to be in that world. And I remember getting into the shuttle once I landed in New York City, and like going down this hill and like seeing Manhattan. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what's happening? And I'm texting my brother. I'm like, Brian, this place is huge. I'm like, how am I gonna do this? And anyways, I got into my hotel room finally, and I was like, okay. I'm like, I'm not leaving. I'm like, I'm not going into that city. I'm just going to sit here, and I am going to watch a movie. And like, I'm here, I made it, and I'm just going to sit here until I have to go and shoot this wedding in 3 days, and that's how I'm going to do this. And I was texting Jessica again. I'm like, okay, I'm here, and I'm terrified, and texting Emily and Kelly and being like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, I paid to be here. I want to enjoy the city anyways. And then Jessica, again, was like, okay, Erin. She's like, just look at this. Like, you're on an adventure with God. It's just you and him. There's nobody else. It's just the two of you. And just kind of sit there on your bed and be like, hey, like, what do you want to do today? And just talk to him like he's a person right beside you. And I was like, okay. And then that was a really cool perspective that I knew anyways, but because of the state I was in, I needed her to be like, okay, no, look at it this way. I'm like, okay. So I looked at it that way, and I was like, okay. So I got changed, and then I was like, okay. So I walked outside of my hotel room, and I stood there. I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, God, what do you want to do? I'm like, where do you want to go? Let's go on a trip. Let's hang out. Do you want to go get a coffee? Do you want to like hang out? And just like, seriously, that's how I had to look at this. And then all I heard was like, okay, go left. I'm like, okay. So I started like walking left. I had no idea where Times Square was or anything. And I had ideas from staring at the map for days. But but yeah, so I was like, okay, God, what do you want to do? And it's like, no, what do you want to do? And I'm like, no, like, tell me, like, I can't think straight right now. And he's like, no, what do you want to do? I'm like, okay. I'm like, I want a Starbucks and I want a vitamin store, because I work at a health food store here, and for some reason it just like holds such a large piece of my heart. It makes me feel like at peace. I'm like, okay, vitamins and coffee. I'm like, I can do this. So I was like, that's what I need right now. I need a Starbucks because I go to Starbucks here all the time with Kelly and Emily. So I'm like, okay, it's like I'm here with Kelly and Emily and you got, okay, I can do this. And then I just keep walking. I'm like, I don't know where I'm walking. Like, okay, this is what I want. But like, I never said it out loud. I just kind of thought it in my head. And then seriously, like, I got to the end of the street and it was like Vitamin World and Starbucks, like directly beside each other. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I just started to laugh and like immediately it was like this like instant peace. I'm like, okay. I'm like, you're right here. I'm like, this is so fun. And I asked the guy, I'm like, where's Times Square? He's like, just keep walking down. I'm like, okay. And I just felt like this like powerful woman. I'm like, I can do this. I can conquer New York City by myself. So I did it, and I had a ton of fun. I had so much fun by myself, but I wasn't by myself. I need to emphasize that. And yeah, and there was this other things within there that I would keep thinking of things I wanted to do, but it was just like in my head, and I didn't think of it being a connection to God at all. Like I wanted to go to a Broadway show, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. I kind of just like sat in the lineup and hoped to get in, and I got in. I'm like, I don't care if I have to pay X amount of money, whatever. And the girl's like, well, there's standing room for like $29. I'm like, okay. So like just all these little things that he cares about, the tiny little things in my life that I wanted to do, and he wanted me to enjoy this trip, and I knew he was there all along, and it was such an encouraging thing. And this is just in the city, and yeah. Anyways, there's a lot of other things I could go on about that, but to continue the story, I had to get to Long Island, New York, which is where I was shooting the wedding, and I hopped on like into a taxi by myself. I had to get to Penn Station. I had no idea how to get there, and I was running late, and again, I needed to find a place with like Wi-Fi, and I found another Starbucks, and I had to find the subway, and I couldn't find an entrance to a subway, and it's like my mom wanted me to go to the pharmacy, so I walked to a pharmacy, and then I walked out, and then I'm like, hey, where's the subway? I'm like, okay, I need to find a Starbucks and get Wi-Fi, so I go in there, and right when I walk out of Starbucks, there's like, I'm just like, okay, like, where's the entrance to the subway? And I look to like my right, and it's like stairs going down. I'm like, oh, I'm like, there it is. And then I ended up getting to where I needed to get to, like, just on time, because I had to stand in line and get tickets to go to Long Island, and it's like, okay, boarding for Rockabama Station, or whatever it was, and then I was like, I'm like, where is this? And there's like all these signs and all these people running. I'm like, I need to get to that station. I just see people running, so I'm like, okay. So I just start running with them. I'm like, I think they're going to the right place. And I see like the sign. I'm like, okay. So I hopped on this train. I'm like, I hope I'm going the right direction. So I did end up going the right direction. And once I got to Long Island, I was with people that I knew from like 2 years ago. And they were absolutely amazing people, completely Bible-believing, Holy Spirit-believing, absolutely amazing people, and I had a great time with them. And I was shooting the wedding, and yeah, I was shooting the wedding, and I had this big backpack with probably like 30 pounds worth of stuff in it. And because I was supposed to have my friend come with me from the beginning of the story, she was supposed to be my assistant. So she would have been holding like all my stuff. And it was on like a public beach. And I knew that the bride wanted a shot of her walking down the aisle and him seeing her like firsthand, like the first time. So I'm like crouched down, like shooting her, and I'm like looking at her, and I'm like, oh, she's so beautiful. I'm like, dang. I'm like, she wanted a shot of his face, so I like throw off my 30-pound bag, and I bolted down to the front of the beach, and like right when he's like going to like look like this, and I was like, okay, and I got it, and I had to run back up and like try and shoot her from behind, and all these different things, because I didn't have an assistant. And so from then on, I just had to continue to shoot the wedding. And if you remember me saying, I had to throw my bag off at a public beach. So it was like 45 minutes later after the ceremony, which was a beautiful ceremony, and I'm like, okay, I need to go grab my bag. And then I look behind me, and I'm like, I swear I put my bag there. I'm like, maybe I didn't, don't panic yet. I'm like, it's okay. Let's add on top of this day was also my birthday. And I was just like, okay. So I was like, hey, don't panic. Like, you need to be professional. You need to shoot this wedding. At least I still had like my one camera and a lens, and I just like threw my camera off to like the videographer saying, you know how to work this thing. I gotta go try and find my bag. And then I went and I tried to find it, and I couldn't find it, and cops were called and all this stuff, and it's their wedding. And it wasn't until like 15 minutes after I noticed that my bag was gone that I like turned to somebody, and I was like, oh, I'm like, my passport was in there. I'm like, I'm supposed to leave tomorrow morning. how am I supposed to get home? And so I just like broke down, and I was trying to not to, because I didn't want to take away from their day or take away any attention. And the father of the groom was a pastor, and I was just like walking down, and he saw my face, and he knew something was wrong. So I told him, and like immediately he just like grabbed me, and he just like started like praying in the spirit and started praying over me, saying everything's gonna be okay. And I was just like bawling. I'm like, okay. And then I like immediately I was like, okay guys, I'm like, I gotta shoot your wedding. I'm like, let's do this. They're like, seriously, like you need to figure this out. I'm like, no. I'm like, it is your wedding. This is one day. I can figure this out tomorrow. And I'm like, let's do this. And so I'm trying to like build this confidence and just keep going. And anyways, we ended up going back to the reception, and in the midst of it, I didn't want to have my phone on me, yet my family is calling me like 8 times, trying to be like, what's going on? Because I called my dad eventually and said, hey Dad, I lost my passport and about almost $4,000 worth of equipment as well in this bag, and I don't know how I'm gonna get home. And then he's like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, because they already knew of everything else that had happened on this trip. And they're like, what else can go wrong? And then he like kind of started to laugh. He's like, seriously? And I'm like, I'll be fine. And he's like, no. And then I break down. I'm like, Dad, you need to not make me cry. I'm like, I got to get through this day. So then, yeah, anyways, my family's called me a million times and had my camera on me. And I have like not enough room on my camera because my other memory card was in the bag. I had to take pictures off and put it onto the computer and put my pictures on somebody else's hands and hope that once I get back to Canada, I'm going to get these pictures back after everything. And so going to call my family back and hearing them say, now we're going to do the father and daughter dance. I'm like, I got to go. And I'm like running out and trying to like get that shot. And then them being like, you have to call the government. You have to call customs. And they're talking to Paul because he knows all this stuff from school and different things, being like, hey, she needs to do this. And then Emily and Kelly are like, hey, we're going to hop in the car. We're going to drive out there and we're going to come and get you because you can't get across. And like without your birth certificate and whatever we discovered, you didn't have to have that. Anyways, so I was in the middle of calling the government, and I was like, okay, I'm like, my passport was stolen, and they canceled it and everything, and then I was kind of like, okay, and like, here I am, and I feel alone again, kind of, but I remembered that moment that I knew that I wasn't, and yeah, so I get off the phone, I just stood there for a second, I'm like, okay, and like, you'll figure this out, and then, I like walked out, and there was this random lady just standing there, and she's like, hi. I'm like, hi. And she's like, did you ever find your stuff? And I was like, no. And I mean, everyone knew because there was like cops and everything at the wedding, so they knew something that happened. So yeah, I was like, no, I didn't find my stuff. And then she's like, well, where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Peterborough, which is like 2 hours east of Toronto. And she's like, oh. She's like, well, we're from Toronto, and we're actually driving back as of Tuesday. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. And then I was just like, So I called my sister back, and Kelly and Emily already had like bags packed and had like about to hop in the car. I'm like, guys, there's somebody here who can drive me home. And they're like, seriously? And they were like obviously hesitant. They're like, no, we just want to get you in our hands because this is insane. And then, yeah, anyways, these people, like the craziest thing about it is I started talking to this woman, and she introduced me to her husband and to her son, and they were just these unbelievable people who are Christians, like hardcore Christians. They're both pastors at Catch the Fire in Toronto. They knew of Billy Burke. They had been to one of his services before. They knew of our church. They knew of all these things, and they started talking about their older son, Josh, and how he's played for 1,000 Foot Crutch before as like their bass player or something in the band. And there was a connection there, and that he knew Trevor really well, and they knew something like that. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. And then their company that they own is a company that we sell at Joanne's place, and there's just all these weird different things, like these weird connections that we just hit it right off. And they like immediately right there were like, can we just like pray for you? And I'm like, yeah, definitely. And then so they prayed for me, and the next day I hopped in the car with them, and I went into the city with them again and spent the day there, just relaxed. And then we made it across the border totally fine, and they paid for everything. They wouldn't let me offer them a penny for anything, and they were just, it was such a blessing. And my mom, I was talking to her last night, and she's like, I'm not sure if I told you this, but she's like, like another little story from when I was in the city. I went to go meet this photographer, and I missed my stop, and I wasn't going to be able to go and meet him, and I was in the middle of New York by myself, and he's like this huge, like really famous photographer, and my mom had been praying, God, I can't rescue her right now, so you have to. And I had called the studio and told them I'm not going to be able to make it. I don't really know where I am right now, but I just hopped off the bus because I know I'm going the wrong direction. And I got to find my way back to the city, which is like an hour and a half out of my way. And they're like, okay, well, can we call you back? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So then they call me back, and they're like, actually, Rodney's going to come down and pick you up, which is the photographer that I've looked up to for the past, 8 years and, have his pictures on my wall. And he himself was coming to pick me up. And I'm like, seriously? And it's, pouring rain. Okay, get this. It's pouring rain. And there's this guy, just like the movies, comes driving by, and this, big splash, goes over me. I'm like, oh, my gosh. I'm like, as if he's coming to pick me up right now. I look like this, and I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, hey, Rodney Smith is coming to pick you up. I'm like, you're fine. And I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, this is cool. And he picks me up. I'm like, oh, hi. And then I was like, seriously? And I just couldn't believe it happened. And then afterwards, he drove me back to the bus stop, and he was just this normal person, obviously, but it just blew my mind. And then at the same time, and I told my mom about everything, she was just like, okay, God, again, I can't rescue her. And I know that she just needs to keep being rescued, but can you please rescue her again? And and then this lady was there, and I got home, and I lost a lot of equipment and everything like that, but because of different things, I'm able to get insurance on it all, or had insurance on it all, that I'm going to get it all back, which blows my mind that it all worked out. And when I was trying to think about coming to talk about this, I was like, this is a long story. I don't want to drown it out too long. And there's so many things I learned from this trip. Within 5 days, I feel like my entire life was changed. And I'm like, how do I come up here and tell them? It's like one thing and focus on one thing and tell them that, because I can't, because I made a list. It built up my faith. It made me realize I'm never alone, that God's always with us. He cares about the small things too. He knows us so well. Encouragement in prayer, and walk in my life in the power of prayer. I got a new peace, because amidst all of this going on, I'd make jokes to people, and they'd be like, how are you making jokes? Because they'd be like, oh wait guys, I need to get this shot. Oh wait, I don't have that lens to do this shot. And make all these jokes. They're like, you need to not joke about this. This is serious. I'm like, no, I have to do it this way. It's fine. My stuff got stolen. And trying to make different things with just new perspective on things, and confidence, and even the fear that I'm going to be okay. And just in general, all of us, we're going to be okay, and how he is always there and cares about everything, and how great he is. That I went on this crazy adventure, and it sounds like a movie, but I laugh about it, but it's real, and it happened, and it was a lot of fun. And people are like, oh, they're like, are you gonna go traveling this year, or did New York kind of taint that for you? I'm like, no. I'm like, if anything, it makes me want to travel more. I'm like, this is so exciting. And it was exactly like Jessica said, this is my adventure with God, and it was a lot of fun, and just encouragement that anything can happen, and he's always with us, and that's kind of what this comes down to. Yeah.
Wonderful.